Ancestors, let me be your drum tonight. Speak through me. Ancestors, let me be your drum tonight. Speak through me. Bestow me with elephant ears. Allow me to see.
Bird said, see with your ears and hear with your eyes. Bird said, see with your ears and hear with your eyes.
Ancestors, let me be your well tonight, flowing cool and clear. Ancestors, let me be your well tonight, flowing cool and clear. Bestow me with eagle's eyes, allow me to hear.
He's for sure, I'll sign it. Yeah, what the hell? You know, right? And I became back involved with the Black Student Union again, and they attempted to kick me out, and I had a trial on campus band, everything, you know. But let me just tell you about Raymond. Let me just, if you don't mind. When I met Raymond, well, with the Black Call staff, and I said, man, this dude, he's got something on the ball, man. You know, like at that time, there was a big gap between cultural and political activities. On the one hand, you had the US organization highlighting the cultural, and then you had on the other hand, you had the Black Panther Party, which highlighted the political. Now, I was always closest to the Black Panther Party, but I had friends in US organizations and that sort of thing, you know. But I saw Raymond and started hearing him speaking, and I said, wow, man, you know, like, this dude's people's poet. Now, let me explain what the word people means in context. At various times, you know, like humanity has been called the masses. Now they call it the working class. But during that time period, the greatest sobriquet was to appeal to our people and designate them as the people. And we was, for example, the Black Panther Party's slogan was to serve the people. John Lennon had a song called "The Power to the People." You know, it was the part of the lingo at that time. I said, man, this dude is the poet, man. You know, like he's a poet of our people. So damn, he's a people's poet, you know. And the name fit and the name stuck, and I'm so proud of him. I am. I'm really happy for him. His life turned out wonderful. He's got a wonderful wife, and he's got his head straightened up. And we waited 50. I'm going to finish in just 1 second. We waited 50 years for this time period to come back around. Mm-hmm. It was a revolutionary time during that time period. And now the youngsters at BLM have taken it back over. And the only thing I can do is tip my hat, donate a few dollars, and do whatever I can on the side to assist that process. You know, but the people's poet. If you know anybody from that time period, and you mentioned the people's poet, I said, oh well, yeah, that's Raymond Nat Turner. You know, yes, you know. So it's a nickname became a name.
It was a time of struggle and uprising and awareness, and that's when we had the Black Call, and people were just united, and it was just a different thing. And we also were able to, I believe, if I'm correct, start the Black Studies curriculum at that time. And that was very important. And we had a lot of people that participated. I loved all those classes. It was also the time of the Black Panther Party was established. And the Black Hall and the BSU, or the Black Students Union. And also it was during that time, I have to laugh when we talk about the time that the administration building was taken over, because I was one of those that was on the back going, yeah, because if my mom had seen me, it would have been all over. So, but that did happen, and it was just a very important time. And it's funny that we have really looped and come back 50 years and we're still talking about the same injustice. And if I can move on to my memories about my brother Ray, I remember you always having a cap on. And the brothers, being the people's poet, he always had a notebook and a pen in his hand. Always, you did. You always carried it right under your arm. I guess you were always ready to write it down, and that's what you have to do, be ready with those thoughts, right? And I did have the honor of taking his written paper, his written poems from paper to typed poems. And I typed them with honor on a manual, not electric, typewriter. And I'm very honored to say that I have done that. And it's just been, this 50 years later, it's just been fabulous, and it's just been wonderful. So power to you, brother.
Oh, sweet.
Ancestors, let me be your drum tonight. Speak through me.
Sometimes I feel like a mother's child. Oh, with home, Lord, with home. We just laid my mother to rest. She died June 1st, my birthday. Our journey together in this world began June 1st and ended June 1st. But did it really? Within her, I began and she spoke to me. Now within me, she began and I speak to her. My mother, Caffie Greene, was a legend shrouded in stories. My sister said she sometimes started speeches by saying, if you want to know who I am, ask the FBI.
See with your ears and hear with your eyes. Bird said, see with your ears and hear with your eyes.
we have this technology that enables us to, or enables me today to reach out to the Aloha state and say happy birthday to Tamara Swift, Dr. Turner's mother. It also enables me to reach down into the Sunshine State where there's Governor Insantis, or Insanity, whatever he goes by, and say, keep up, keep struggling, to my mother-in-law, Ellie Lowenberg. It also enables me to reach up into the Empire State and take a moment of silence for one of our colleagues with the National Writers Union, Susan Davis, who checked out Saturday. She was a contract and grievance officer with the National Writers Union. And she had just recently done a book contract for one of my colleagues with the Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberly. Anyway, I would like to take just a moment of silence on this media to honor our dear departed colleague at the National Writers Union. Okay, thank you.
Sue Davis, presente.
Well, we enjoyed a recap from the previous episode, and some of my comrades from back at the Los Angeles City College days joined us on that episode. And so that was quite a blessing. So in this case, we are going to, it's going to be a special treat for me. It's going to be a special treat for me. But before we go there, I'd like to say to you what I said again on the last episode, that this isn't the Wizard of Oz, and I won't be telling you, pay no attention to that woman behind the curtain. In fact, I'm going to encourage you to pay very close, strict attention to that woman behind the curtain, because she's our very talented stage manager. And if we were in the business, if we were merchants of death and we were selling weapons of mass destruction, we would call her our secret weapon. If we were a corporation, we would say she's proprietary ingredients. So none other than the great Sarah Gasser, please. And to my left, my left-handed woman, my left-handed lady here, the editor, the graphic designer, the director, producer, actually executive producer of 2 award-winning CDs, All Hands on Deck and Chromatology, and also producer for this endeavor, the Zigsters of Lowenberg, Zigi Lowenberg.
Hello there. In honor of my beloved mother-in-law, tonight, this evening, somewhere in the East Coast, it's the beginning of a very high holy day for my tribe. It's Erev Yom Kippur. And often on Yom Kippur, in addition to looking at where we've been off the mark and making atonement for that, we also honor our ancestors. So it's very appropriate that we're here and I'm here honoring my beloved mother-in-law, Caffie Greene. And this was an obituary from the Los Angeles Wave, The Soul Vine, remembering Caffie Greene. On Monday, another one of the Southland's warriors for justice and equality was laid to rest. Caffie Greene, a feisty, multitasking whirlwind who emerged from the destruction of the 1965 Watts riot taking charge of the changes it wrought, died last week at age 91 after a long period of illness. And I had already been missing her for years, ever since she became too old and too sick to kick butt. Caffie Greene was a legend. I had known her virtually all my life, and I really liked her. I liked her style, her energy, her righteous indignation, her flair for achieving change, her tactical ability to make naysayers say yes, and her selflessness, as everything she did was about us, never about her. As Senator Ted Kennedy said about his dead brother Bobby, quote, "He never saw a wrong he didn't right." The same can be said of Caffie, as she too never saw a wrong she didn't right or need she did not fill. Caffie is famously remembered for being a primary force that created the Martin Luther King Jr. General Hospital, the Charles R. Drew University Medical School, the Watts Health Foundation, and a metropolitan transportation system that brought buses to South LA, thus ending the area's isolation from the rest of the county. She fought police brutality, organized residents to protest employment discrimination, pulled together women to picket markets that sold rotten meat and vegetables, and most notably fought racism in Linwood, which at the time was a bastion of anti-Black activity. Whatever Caffie was into was always a news story, and she was therefore an asset to my career. Plus, I really enjoyed being around her. When she had the time, she was a good cook, and I delighted in just going to her house to eat and talk about people. I will continue to miss her.
I have to start by thanking my ancestors for paving the way for me to be here today, especially my grandmother, Caffie Greene, who's one of the greatest civil rights leaders in Los Angeles history. She was born in Arkansas to a mother who was a sharecropper, and her father, her grandfather, was born into slavery on a plantation in Georgia. My family, my grandmother, she instilled in me a sort of resiliency. She shared with me her faith and her social activism, which was largely rooted in the Baptist church.
Again, I've been talking a lot about my grandmother and my parents. So my grandmother was a great civil rights leader, perhaps one of the greatest civil rights leaders in Los Angeles history. As I was mentioning before the show, she actually founded the Martin Luther King Hospital in South Central Los Angeles, the only public hospital in South Central Los Angeles. And she founded the Charles Drew Medical University, the only Black medical university west of the Mississippi River, and one of only 4 medical universities in the Black medical universities in the United States. Her name is Caffie Greene, a very rare name, C-A-F-F-I-E, Greene with an E on the end of it.
Okay, and this was your grandmother?
My grandmother, my father's mother.
And you mentioned you're trying to do some research on her, or you're writing
Yes,
a book about her?
I have a 300-page manuscript. Last year UMass was so beautiful, they allowed me to go on a 1-year sabbatical. So I went back to California. I lived in Oakland, and UC Berkeley gave me a title, Visiting Associate Researcher. And so I actually got
Sounds very impressive, doesn't it?
Yeah, right? Visiting Associate Researcher. And so I got to go right back to the same office where I had written my dissertation. My PhD is from UC Berkeley. But I went into that office, and every couple weeks I'd go down to Los Angeles, and I interviewed many of the people she worked with, from dignitaries, such as ambassadors, Diane Watson, Maxine Waters, all of the different politicians she helped cultivate. I got to interview all of them, and then I would go back to my desk at Berkeley and write.
So why do you think history like that of prominent people, particularly of color, why has that been kind of held in the background or not brought to the surface?
Right.
You know, I mean, we got to see so much about Martin Luther King and some of the leaders of the civil rights movement, but there was this huge broad base of these kind of secondary leaders or second-tier leaders that really were implementing so much in civil rights.
Exactly.
But we don't hear much about them.
That's correct.
Why is that?
That is a wonderful question that you're asking, and it really makes me excited about my project and why it's so necessary, okay? The first reason is they were women, okay? And as you saw the past few days, we had the largest demonstration in world history come out against the current administration. Women, for so long, have been thoroughly marginalized. It's called his story. His story. Men traditionally have written the story of the world. And it's now, this is a unique point in our world's time. Women's are waking up, and this full-on rights are there taking their place, not only in the United States, where women's liberation has happened, 20, 30, 40 years ago in some level, but this revolt or this revolution is happening in the whole world, and women are taking their place. And so this story of Caffie Greene has been pushed to the side. And, the story of Los Angeles and civil rights is usually told in as far as what men did, but this is really important because not only she, but she and what is called, affectionately nicknamed, the mothers of South Central Los Angeles. She worked with a cadre of black women mothers. And really, I'm telling the story of the history of the LA civil rights through her.
That's fascinating.
Oh, wow. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Caffie Nat Turner to our session, an intimate evening with the town crier. I get a chance to welcome him in the flesh. Before I do that, I should give a little background on Dr. Turner in that he received his Bachelor of Arts from Brown University, his Master's in Education from Harvard University, and his PhD from the University of California at Berkeley. And I have to say, I was at those graduations, and it was thrilling and quite an honor to be there. However, the thing that most impressed me was each of those events were super spreader events in my mind, and that he has something that I call Roof Flu. He was named Charu, and so we call him Roof for short. And so wherever, at each of those graduations, I noticed that staff and faculty all were suffering from roof flu when they came up to me. Their eyes were welling up, their voices were cracking, and they were saying, "Oh, wow, we're gonna miss him." And so I think for me, I think that's the thing that makes me proudest, because what it indicates is that he was following the tradition and leaving more than he took at each of those institutions. He built community. He helped build institutions that were outside of those edifices. And so that made me the proudest. So without any further ado, welcome Dr. Caffie Nat Turner.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Zig, for having me. It's a pleasure just to join you and to catch up with all the good work you all are doing. But yeah, the first thing I'll say just off the top, in addition to thanking you all, is just thanking Caffie Greene for having you and for being our grandmother and for giving so much to so many people. And being able to be part of that, it was just a gift that she gave to all of us. And I'll just also say, thank to this land that we're on today. My parents birthed me on Duwamish lands there in Seattle, Washington. And so I thank them for that land. And then also right now I'm a professor at UMass, which is the traditional homelands of the Nahuatl people. And just giving thanks for the sacrifices that Indigenous made for us to even be here at this moment. And want to just give respect. So thank you. Tonight, from what my understanding is, we're giving honor to Caffie Greene. And just praising her work. Again, as you heard in this documentary clip, I have written a 300-page manuscript that is currently under review to be published about this incredible civil rights leader. Yeah, but I'm open to just sharing some of the highlights about her work. If you want me just to begin with probably the most important thing at this current moment that I'll share about her work as it relates to Black Lives Matter and her work against the what we call the carceral state, or mass incarceration, police brutality. Just a few points I would share would be, in Los Angeles, there was this chokehold, was a very casual sort of action that taken by the police. And she was at the forefront of ending that policy in Los Angeles. And then another thing was around police review boards. So a lot of the push nowadays is for us to create citizen review boards and police review boards. And she regularly gave up her time to sit on those types of boards and surveilled the police and their actions in terms of the brutality and this, what we're seeing so much recently about police murders. So she pioneered those and then spent her time sitting on those and reviewing those. And lastly, she was an inspector of juvenile incarceration centers and youth prisons and women's prisons. And so she was sitting on the Civil Brand Commission in Los Angeles County, which investigates those places to make sure that they are up to sort of human rights standards. And this is another way she fought sort of the way that Black and brown people were, put in these dungeons essentially and written off. And she wasn't going for it. And so she invested her time and really fought for the least of these in these ways. But yeah, I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Well, I'd like to have you, address some of her early years, like in other words, when she made a journey from Arkansas as a preteen to Los Angeles.
Right.
And from that point on, she started to find her footing, get her bearings there. And at a certain point in time, I think it was right around 1945, I believe, the Los Angeles Sentinel identified her as a political dynamo, and subsequently going forward into the 80s, a family friend and actor, Whitman Mayo, who some of you may remember from Sanford and Son as the character Grady. He declared that she was a brilliant organizer, which I concur. And so if you could address some of that, some of her organizing victories and challenges, because I certainly have a few to share.
Okay. Well, the most incredible part about Caffie Greene, and I think we all, when we lost her 10 years ago, she had lived to be 91 years old. So again, her activism starts in the year that we have documented into 1943, during when World War II begins. She was picketing on the picketing with shipbuilders in Todd Shipyard in San Pedro, along with the unions. The point I'm just trying to say is that her longevity makes it such that we could take apart that's from the 40s, was actually even as early as the 30s. So 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and all the way to the year 2000 when she changed the street name in Linwood to the Harriet Tubman Way. She was an activist. So the breadth of her work is just tremendous and deserves more volumes of publication, quite honestly. But to just a little stories about her migration, part of the Great Migration from Arkansas to Los Angeles. You're correct. As she came at the age of 12 years old, to live with her uncle and cousin who were Pullman porters. And Caffie, as a 12-year-old, as a young person, was hearing a lot of different discourses. There was the Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement there in Arkansas, one of the biggest chapters in the whole United States. It was there in Arkansas. Also, a lot of the, as I just mentioned, the Pullman porters were deep there with the railroad and the unions. So you heard these different discourses that she was exposed to about how Black people could empower themselves and should, you know, take control of their own destiny. And so this is, as a young child, she was hearing all these discourses, but at 12 years old, they sent her to Los Angeles for a better life. Because of the Depression, her dad actually was a landowner, or the family's just land farm was flooded, and the Depression. So it was a sort of a double whammy, and they figured she'd have a better life in Los Angeles. And so she went on a train by herself as a 12-year-old, all the way to Los Angeles, which is just a remarkable journey right there. What my dad was talking about was the LA Sentinel in 1947 dubbed her a one-woman dynamo because she decided to raise funds to send to the state of Louisiana to try to prevent the execution of 21-year-old Willie Francis, who was sent to the electric chair. And as I gave you the rundown on Black Lives Matter, at this point, she's merely 30 years old, but already organizing, going from factory to factory, collecting money from union workers to send from Los Angeles all the way to Louisiana. And so you talk about Black Lives Matter now, she was nationally organizing without the internet, you know, without, you know, this is an individual that committed to saving, in this case, one man's life, 21-year-old young people's life. And if you can see the amount of care and you know, determination from that distance, imagine what she was doing locally in Los Angeles to prevent young Black and brown children going into this carceral state. So yeah, that's 1947. She picks up and while Raymond, my father, was in her womb, she walked the picket lines in front of the Crest and 5-10-cent stores on Central Ave to support Black women's efforts to unionize. So Black women were clerks at the Crest 5 and 10 cent store, and she walked, you know, as a pregnant woman on the picket lines with them in solidarity. And this is just the beginning. Her life was committed to whether it's racial justice, ending police brutality, and later, as the foresight, as we're in a public health pandemic now, she saw public health as the major issue around Black Lives Matter. How that we could essentially lower the mortality rate. A lot of Black women were dying at that time in the 60s. And so creating a prenatal center there in South Central Los Angeles to save the women and the babies was at the foremost of her thinking.
One thing I wanted to interject, one thing I'm very appreciative to you, you know, and I've spoken this, you know, I've told you already in various ways, but I'm going to say it again publicly that I'm grateful for the research you did, the FOIA request, the UC Berkeley libraries, the interviews, the numerous interviews. I think you did over 28 interviews or something like that.
Yeah, more like
almost
60.
30 interviews, yeah. And for me, it's like 101 for me, you know, because she was very, very private, very private. And with the grandchildren, she relented somewhat. And, but then your research brought to light a number of things that, you know, I wasn't even privy to. I had no idea how things came to be. And one thing I found very interesting from the standpoint of, you could say, women's liberation, was that in one of your chapters, you talk about where she arrived in LA, and as is the case with immigrants and people fresh off the boat, so to speak, or coming in to the urban area from the rural area, they're kind of looked down upon, looked askance at, and so forth. And so, according to one of your chapters, it says that, oh, you know, she's going to be pregnant before she's even, you know, at an early age, you know, she's going to have a child. Right. And she didn't have her first child until she was 30. Then she had her second one at 35 and her third one at 40. You know? So it was kind of, I find that kind of amazing. And to lead the kind of activist organizer's life that she led, I mean, because she was really in the mix of things, clearly. And I remember she had me on a picket line when I was 9 and my brother was 5. And it wasn't one of those little picket lines where, oh, your children are so cute. It was one of those hardcore picket lines where you're dealing with a racist enterprise, and you're dealing with Proud Boys, pre-Proud Boys, what are the other ones, Boogaloo, whatever. And so they're riding around hurling epithets and objects at us, and we're on this picket line. And it was a place called the Witch Stand. It was a LA institution, and they said that they would not, you know, they took in a lot of Black dollars, but they said they'd rather close than to hire Black people. And actually they got their wish, you know, because that picket line shut them down. And I, you know, and as a 9-year-old, seeing that, you know, it just left a very, very deep impression on me about the power of mass action and organizing.
Right, right. So just to put a little texture on this, what you're saying is when she first got to Los Angeles. When she first got to Los Angeles with her cousin's family, they believed she had come there to be their maid. You know, that was the role that she was going to play, this 12-year-old girl. She came to be their maid. And so she did. She cleaned their house. I'm sure she helped with the cooking. She was an excellent cook. I mean, mostly I did 60 interviews, by the way. Nearly every single one of those people interviewed talked to her cooking. And so you can imagine coming as a 12-year-old already with incredible cooking skills. She also had a degree in culinary from the community college in Los Angeles. LA Trade Tech is called now. But the point is, so they expected her to be a maid, essentially. And as family members, they were actually rather cruel to her. And they did chastise her and yeah, tell her that you will get pregnant and that you will be nothing. You won't be anything. They would just put this mantra to her. I'm not sure exactly where, why, but anyway, they would also not let her sleep in the bed. They would let the dog sleep at the foot of the bed, but they had Caffie sleep on the floor. This is the type of thing that, she was exposed to even by her own family. But as my father has said, this really motivated her to not have a child, to really kind of go against what their predictions were for her life. But she did credit this family for one important thing. She always said, even though they were not nice to me, they demanded I go to school. They mandated I go to school. And it was that mandate that she go to school that she still appreciated them for. And she passed it on to my, her children and definitely to me, that was one ticket to freedom and to liberation. And it was clearly for her, yeah.
Wow. There's a question that we have from one of our guests, participants, our audience members rather, sorry. Did Mama Caffie have a specific lens or ideology she saw things through, or was it justice and rights on every practical level that she did so well? How would you address that?
Wow, that is a great question. And that is actually something, as I mentioned, the Garveyite ideology here at the top of the program, and I mentioned the unions, the Booker T. Washington integrationist sort of concepts. So she was in this whirlwind of all of these ideologies, if you will. And if I had to label her, I would label her more of a pragmatist, more than anything, and a human rights advocate. So her thing was to demand every single thing that any white person had in this country, that any Black person should have the exact same access and opportunity. So any time she would argue for that and demand it. And so in this way, she was able to win a lot of the concessions from white supremacist, capitalist, hetero, cis patriarchy, and the systems of Jim Crow by making demand and organizing and bringing people out to the streets to make the demand that she was articulating if they couldn't understand it.
Right. And a very clear thing that I've read and listened to those interviews, a lot of the interviews, and had known her, but in her later years, is that it was never about her. That was mentioned in the obituary that I read that somebody wrote. And partly she had great credentials and credibility. She built her credentials, but it was based on this integrity and credibility in the community, because
Right.
she never, it wasn't about her. So it wasn't about selling out. She never considered selling out.
Right.
Yeah, it was very important. So thank you.
Right. And just in terms of credentials, just real simple credentials is that when individuals like Malcolm X would come to Los Angeles in 1964, 1965, but same with Martin Luther King, when they would come to Los Angeles, they would call Caffie Greene up and ask her to support them in what the lay of the land in Los Angeles was. So that was, just major.
Can I ask you, Charu, being a grandson, Raymond alluded to that you got maybe some more information, personal information, than he did growing up, and she was quite in the thick of it as the movement was in the 60s as well. But I know that she raised her family to take part in community events and activities very, very strongly. So what was that kind of like when you spent time with her in Los Angeles?
That is one of the joys of my storytelling. I don't talk about it that much in the book because I try not to make the book sort of about me, but
well, here's your opportunity.
The time I got to run with Caffie Greene is the times of the greatest learning maybe that I've ever experienced in my life. I actually got to live with her during the year 1999-2000 when I graduated from college as an undergrad. I lived in Linwood with her and taught at a junior high school. Actually, Penny, my dad's sister, went to the junior high school, Hostler Middle School, and I taught there. And I walked to school every day and taught, the children. So what it was like going with Caffie, we would go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And in every single meeting, she listened. She took every single piece of literature on every table in hand, in her bag to study up on later. And during the meeting, after she listened for a while, she would stand up and make her presence known and tell everyone in the meeting what she was there to do and who she was there speaking on behalf of. Black people, poor working class people, and that their rights were not going to be denied. Again, like I mentioned, any level, from any way they were being discriminated against, she was the mouthpiece to end it. It most literally in Linwood, it was at the Linwood, two places. She was still on the board at Charles Drew Medical University and Linwood Unified School District. She was very involved. And so she would speak at her board meetings at the hospital, and then also, at the Linwood Public School District, and just let people know any issue. And also, as people organized, they would ask her, could you come to the meeting and speak on our behalf and be in solidarity with us? And so she would go, and we would sit right there in the front, and she would let everybody know how it was going to go down.
How would you say that compared with your experience too, the generation before?
Yeah, well, I have an experience. I played baseball, little league baseball at Will Rogers Park, which is now Ted Watkins Park in Los Angeles. And my brother was 5 years younger, so he technically shouldn't have even been playing, but my mom twisted some arms, or she made some things happen. And fast forward, my younger brother signed a contract with the Yankees and went to A and then AA. But he was an outstanding ball player. He shouldn't have even been playing. And both of us made All-Star. And so my mom said, okay, come go with me to this meeting. And I said, I don't want to go to your political meetings. I just want to play baseball. Yeah, I just want to play Little League baseball. And she said, everything is political. She said, how do you think that park got there? How do you think your coach got hired? And I never forgot it. In the immediate, in real time, I thought she had flipped and, blown a gasket or something. But, going forward, I saw that she was absolutely correct. Everything is indeed political. And on that note, like Abby Lincoln once said, when she was talking about Lady Day, Billie Holiday, she said, I suppose people are famous because there's a lot of, or legends because there's a lot of stories about them. And there's a whole bunch of stories about my mom, and I think her ties with the masses of people, with all different types of people, is absolutely unparalleled. And I say that, not as a son, I say that as someone who's been out, watched people organize, been engaged in various organizations. I mean, she had connections. Well, firstly, because she was such a good cook, she had a restaurant on 103rd, which is the main drag in Watts, is where the Watts Rebellion of '65 was concentrated. And she knew police officers, preachers, pimps, prostitutes, politicians, and those are just the P's. And they all brought information because she was a listener, you know, as Dr. Turner said, you know, she was a listener and she took notes. And so she was aware of what was going on in every aspect of the community. And when it came to negotiating and making demands, you know, she was very adept at that. But also because she had different kinds of contacts, you know, she could do it the easy way with you in negotiation, or she could bring some people who had spent some time away. And, you know, like if you know, in New York, it would be upstate, you know, you might recognize Attica or, you know, whatever the others are. But in California, Soledad and Tracy and all this other, and San Quentin. So she had people who were very, very loyal to her. And if she needed to bring them into the negotiation to speed up the process, she wouldn't hesitate for a minute. Because again, it wasn't about her and it wasn't about an ego. It was about bettering the community at large.
Right. And if I can just chime in here, in 1972, on the heels of the Gary, Indiana political convention, this is about 38 years ago. That's when she also founded a grassroots caucus. So it was her own Black political party. So this is a little bit example for the person who asked about her ideology. She puts this Black grassroots caucus together sort of to the left of the Democratic Party and calls for leading Blacks, sometimes called Black leaders, these leading Blacks to show up at this grassroots caucus or else, you know, that this would be the Black vote is going to be organized under this auspices in California, in Los Angeles. And it included, again, the Black radical nationalists, cultural nationalists, socialists, Maoist, Democratic Party, and Democratic Black elected officials.
Speaking about that, I just wanted to say that in the San Francisco Bay View newspaper a while ago, there was an article on Congresswoman Maxine Waters, affectionately known to some folks these days as Auntie Maxine. And it states in the article, with the encouragement of Mary Henry, Opal Jones, Lillian Harkless Mobley, Caffie Greene, Margaret Wright, and other Black women in policy, Waters decided to run for office at the height of the women's movement. She was elected as a member of the California Assembly in 1976. She said this in the article, and I quote, "I have the valuable experience of knowing these Black women, of learning from them, and I adopted the spirit. The spirit was profound, and they knew how to challenge elected officials and to go through City Hall and to talk about the budget and talk about appointments, etc."
I want to tell you about how she got Maxine Waters elected, if you want to hear that story.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So what I mentioned just a second ago about this Black grassroots caucus is Caffie decided she was not going to run for these offices. If she would be elected to any of these positions, it would sort of tie her hands from doing a lot of the work behind the scenes, drafting a lot of the candidates and preparing them to become office holders, and again, more importantly, holding them accountable. She would not be able to do that. So in 1976, on the heels of the National Black Women's sort of meeting, she drafted Maxine Waters to run for her first campaign for the California State Assembly's 48th district. And before that, there had only been one other Black woman elected to the California State Assembly, who was Yvonne Brathwaite Burke. But Greene, Caffie, the Mothers of South Central, and her new organization she formed, along with the Black Grassroots Caucus, she formed the National Coalition of Concerned Black Women. So using all of these organizational powers, what she did was come up with a women-centered campaign to get this Black woman, Maxine Waters, elected. And the concept was brilliant. Because they didn't have much money to defeat the incumbent, they came up with a campaign aimed at women, recruiting women and getting women to go out and vote. And so they came up with this idea of seeds. So they collected these seeds, very cheap, you know. They got cilantro seeds for Mexicans. They got collard green seeds for Blacks. And I mean, forget what seed they had for the white folks, but they had seeds for the white folks too. But they sent these seeds out along with Maxine Waters' publication. And they had a slogan. The slogan was, "A dollar saved is a dollar earned." And Maxine Waters, when I got to interview her, she said when she would go door to door in nowadays, people would still tell her, "We have this collard green plant we grew back when you were running the first time." And so anyway, it was brilliant, sort of like someone mentioned tactics. She, as an organizer, she had just a really incredible way to cultivate and galvanize people.
That's beautiful. There's another question in the chat that's
it was carrot seeds for the white women, by the way.
Carrot seeds, all right. Could you speak on the effect of knowing how learning about this family history and your research and recovering some of this history, how it's affected you in some way and affected your relationship with the rest of your family? And can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I mean, the most powerful thing for me in this process is getting even closer to her. So when my dad said in his Afro solo piece, did we lose her or did we not lose her on June 1st, 2010? You know, in some ways, this project has brought me closer to her than I ever had been, even when she was here in the flesh. Seeing her longevity and again, what she's given, it was a shock to everyone in Los Angeles when she transitioned in 2010, because she had been there for nearly a century organizing on our behalf. So to lose her was just, people were in shock. And this project helped me understand the gravity of what she gave and how long and hard she organized. So as far as personally, it's just sort of motivates me to not let off the pedal, to know that this is intergenerational struggle, number one. Again, like I mentioned, her grandfather being born into slavery. So our struggle is not, is not ended. And yeah, just to have the energy and the focus to keep going. And as far as family, I think our family is in a similar position to me, just a little bit dumbfounded about uncovering the greatness. We would always say she was a great civil rights leader, but we didn't know exactly the extent and really the ins and outs. And again, I'm overusing the word longevity, but from the 40s to 2000, 60 years worth of work. It's incredible.
For me, it's just, it gives me a sense of the tradition I'm from, and it helps me understand why I do certain things that I do and why I have certain commitments, because just like she had a commitment in the political realm, in the realm of healthcare, in the realm of jobs and justice, and particularly she loved youth. There's no question about that. I mean, we should talk about the legendary Teen Post that she was director of at some point, and maybe bring some other voices in that we know. But she just really was committed, and it wasn't about her, and it was always about community. That was the word that I heard the most in my household: community, 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 community.
On that note, can we play some of those clips that we have? We'll be hearing from Richard Harrison, Lena Coles, Ann Fields, and Nola Carter. And then Raymond will explain a little. And these were interviews that Charu did for his book. And then we'll also want to find out the latest status of the book, the upcoming book.
I think the history that she provided, I think that the groups that come along now needs to know about some of the history that she had. She was a great woman and very well known in terms of the Black Operational Program. But more than that, she was not all Black. She was for people, poor and low-income people. And she wanted to see people have a better life for themselves. And she had a lot of information. I think she came from the South, coming to the area of California to assist a lot of these programs. So they got started, and she was right in there.
Caffie Greene's main part was to know your worth, know that you're worthy, to know that you can do things to empower yourself. It wasn't that she empowered you, she gave you the power to empower yourself. She did that with so many young women. Gail T., Lena Cole Dennis, just so many wonderful young women. Consistently cultivating women leaders, consistently mentoring people in everything. We're not just talking about politics, we're talking about health. She was a huge health advocate.
We did what had to be done to get what we needed, huh?
When Caffie Greene hired Bunchy to run the Teen Post, how did that happen?
I don't know how it happened, because the kids would go to the Teen Post, huh? And Miss Greene was the director. And I guess Bunchy was like his daddy, huh?
Bunchy came to the team. When Bunchy got out of prison, he came to the Teen Post, and we started the group called the Radicals at the Teen Post. The Radicals turned into the Panthers.
Okay.
But the first group that was, because all the guys belonged to Slauson.
When she hired Bunchy to run the Teen Post after he got out of Soledad prison, did she do that as a favor to you?
No. I didn't know Miss Greene then. I guess when Bunchy would get out of school, he'd go up there and I don't know, he's a poet, huh? He was a writer too.
Yes.
So I don't know, him and Miss Greene got to be so thick. and she and then I met Miss Greene, huh?
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
So then it was Miss Greene and Miss Mobley and Nola. Honey, we was something.
In Eldridge Cleaver's book, he says that Caffie hired Bunchy to help control the boys because Caffie couldn't control the boys.
Yeah. Caffie could control everybody because she controlled
But
us.
you know more because you was up there, huh?
Yeah. And she had us controlling the kids because we were young. But she was controlling us, so she had full control.
Okay.
She had, she did it. She had a plan. She executed the plan. And we, because she walked up to me, I was going to shoot the police or somebody. I had a gun. She said, no, you don't want to do that. She took the gun away from me and took me to the Teen Post, and that's how we got hooked up.
She said, no, you're going to work like this. This is how you get things done. You shoot the police, you go into jail. Caffie controlled us, and we controlled the kids, so Caffie controlled everything.
She was a magnificent woman, and she taught us, because we didn't know nothing about what we was doing. Caffie, see, we worked in NAP, and Caffie, I don't know where Caffie come from, her and her sister, but they was terrorists, huh? Both of them. And what we know, Caffie taught us. They were afraid of her, huh? So we, Miss Mobley and I was learning how to do what she was doing. The only way we are where we are today is because we shared what we had with each other, huh?
Oh my gosh. Oh, well, the greatest woman lived. Yeah, she in Rosa Parks. She's in her territory.
That's right.
For California, you know, and for the rights of us.
I hear you.
And to putting black people and getting black people into office.
Yes.
It was just, Caffie was, I would say, she was our whole east, south central area. She was a lady. Caffie Greene was. But she just was a trailblazer, you know, for the blacks. Yeah, Caffie Greene was.
That's a little taste. Do you want to clarify some of what Nola Carter was saying and who she is?
Yeah, no. For those of you who may not know, Nola Carter is the mother of the late Alprentice Bunchy Carter, who was the Deputy Minister of Defense for the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party, and along with John Huggins was assassinated January 17th, 1969 on the campus of UCLA by the US organization. Arguably, Bunchy Carter was a leader, charismatic leader on par with Chicago's Fred Hampton, because he organized all these youth organizations, or street tribes as they call it, or some call them street gangs. But the street organizations in LA came up as anti-racist formations to fight against racist crackers who were attacking Black folks who had newly moved from down south to up south and out south, as Malcolm talked about. And so they were really self-defense organizations, you might say. And then, of course, as time goes on, everything changes and evolves into something else. And so they became kind of gangs in some sense of the word. The Slawsons were the gang. It was a very large formation. But what Bunchy did is he brought all of those groupings together across the city of Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is a huge city. For those of you who may not know, the county of Los Angeles is 500 square miles, I believe, which is larger than some states. And so he brought a lot of these groupings together. And because of that, just as Fred Hampton was a target in Chicago for bringing all these different street tribes together, and even going further, bringing Euros from Appalachia in the mix. You know, his was the first Rainbow Coalition. So that put a target on Fred's back and on Bunchy's back, because Fred Hampton was assassinated December 4th or 5th of 69. Bunchy Carter was assassinated along with John Huggins January 17th of 69. So at the beginning of the year, Bunchy was assassinated. And then at the end of the year, Fred Hampton was assassinated. And you know, not to spin out, but just to be clear, we need to recognize what I'm saying here, that they talk about peaceful and orderly transition. There has never been peaceful and orderly transition in the US. It's an abomination or an aberration when it occurs. You know, if you look at, we had leaders like Medgar Evers, who was killed in '63. Malcolm was killed February of '65. King was killed in April of '68, and on and on and on. These were our leaders. These are the people that we had selected as our leaders, and they were elected or taken out with hot lead ballots, if you will. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. And Bunchy, Al Prince Bunchy Carter, when he was released from Soledad prison, my mom hired him at the teen post she was director of to be her assistant director. And Bunchy, along with others like Gail Davis, and whose voice you heard in the background when Miss Nola Carter was speaking, formed a group. You formed a group called the Radicals. The Radicals were a precursor to the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party. And the Southern California chapter of the Black Panther Party, without question, was the chapter that endured the most repression. They had the most members killed. In fact, in the last episode of An Intimate Evening with the Town Crier, I talked about what brought me into writing was the death of my best friend at that time, who was killed in '68 by the LAPD. So,
Nola, his mom, also mentioned that Bunchy was a poet. So how did that influence you? He was like a big brother to you at a certain time.
He was. He was like an older brother and mentor to myself and my brother Steve, my younger brother Steve. He was a wonderful poet. He even sang and danced, and he was just incredible with young people. My mom was really wise to have hired him, and his performance, his recitations really inspired me to want to do just that.
But something about your mom and how she influenced and contributed to your art and the growth of your art. And I know it started early. We've talked about your love as a child of having her read to you. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. One of I think the first thing that occurred was that she read to me as a very young child and read nursery rhymes and sung lullabies to me and that kind of thing. And then later on, she made books available and plentiful in the household. And she always had interesting people visiting, and the people were not only interesting, but they were interested in me. And so that translated.
You also went to cultural events and.
She really stressed and emphasized taking ourselves, that being my brother, sister later on, but also the kids in the neighborhood, particularly the kids on our street. We would go to Forest Lawn and see the Da Vinci paintings and the statues and so forth. And we went to the Los Angeles County Museum and saw jazz performances, outdoor jazz performances and all that. And so it was really imbuing the children of the hood, so to speak, with culture.
Right. There was one particular jazz artist you saw that I think inspired even an early configuration of your jazz poetry ensembles.
Oh yeah, that was Ornette Coleman. I saw Ornette Coleman at the LA County Museum. It was a group of us that my mom brought on 2 buses, and we came in a little late, and everyone looked around. Here's this chocolate sea flooding into this crowd that is predominantly Euro. And so, but the kids, we loved it, because we didn't know that 3 individuals could make that much music. And it was very blues infused, and it just grabbed us, all of us.
Wow. So culture would not be denied like the other
Right.
aspects that Charu said. Everything that was available should be available. And you mentioned having people around the house a lot. And 3 people in particular, one you mentioned already was Whitman Mayo,
Right.
Pat Alexander, and Clifton Willis.
Yeah, Pat Alexander was my mom's best friend at a particular point, and she also was a publisher of a newspaper called the Herald Dispatch. And that paper was a bit more left than the predominant African-American paper, which was the LA Sentinel. And Pat Alexander, I remember she came over to the house, and somehow I had gotten a copy of Karl Marx's Das Kapital, and she said, you'll never read that, you'll never finish it. And so I challenged her. I thought I would, but history has proven her correct. It was a very daunting volume to get through, particularly for a young person. At my mom's youth center, the Teen Post, all types of literature was available, period. I probably ran across Marx's Wage Labor and The Condition of the Working Class in England by Engels, and certainly works by Mao Zedong, because my mom was very fond of quoting Mao, no investigation, no right to speak. That was one of her favorites.
Can I just jump in on the Pat Alexander, who ran the Herald Dispatch? This woman was actually a really great friend of Caffie Greene. And I also had the pleasure of meeting her. But when I first heard the idea of reparations as a college student, I went to my grandmother and said, "Grandma, this is it. Black people are due reparations." And she totally smiled and she said, "Yes, grandson, that's right." And she said, "If you're interested in that topic, you need to talk with Pat Alexander." And she said, Pat Alexander always said reparations. And she would laugh at, Caffie would sort of laugh and sort of mock this idea that someday the US government would entertain the idea of reparations. Caffie was always, like I said earlier about her ideology, was much more pragmatic. And how do we get healthcare here now versus some eventual sort of apology and reparation. And but I want to just state for the moment right now in post George Floyd era, I think about reparations has come, and I just want to just put something about my own work where I'm at. People asked earlier about her ideology and about how it's changed me, and I would like to just tell one story, sort of that integrates my current work and sort of her work. So thinking about reparations, my current work is now how to use this practice of dynamic mindfulness or yoga to then sort of do heart opening for Black and white folks to have this conversation about reparations. And again, as I mentioned, indigenous off the top. But this yoga practice is, in this opening, is like related to healing, racialized trauma, and so forth. But Caffie, again, like I'm saying, so much more pragmatic. Even before she started the Teen Post, her social activism was rooted in the Baptist church. This comes out of her faith from Arkansas, then to, again, Los Angeles. And in 1958, along with June Bell and Teresa Matthews, she organizes an underground adoption network for Black children. And what was happening was kids who parents went either into jail or who died would get thrown into the foster care system and, you know, be with white families and that sort of thing. And she would bring in these children. And that was, yeah, something that she started and really took a lot of kids in. Like my father was saying, she always had kids around. Gail Davis, who ended up being at the Team Post, credits her as another sort of mother. And many, many, many people who I interviewed also credited her more as a mother figure for actually raising them. And this is just another way her sort of activism was channeled through her faith and in the Baptist church.
I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't share a couple of anecdotes with her, because, you know, we're talking about this organizing and this sophisticated policy development and grooming politicians and all that. And those things are correct. Those things are true. But the thing I think that is very important to point out, you know, we talked about just how, you know, kind of forward thinking she was, having children at 30, 35 and 40, you know, delaying that and being able to do the kind of work that she saw her community needed. You know, it's important to point out that she was the second child. You know, she had two brothers. She was sandwiched in between two brothers. And when her mom left, you know, as she's the young one, she becomes really the woman of the household. So she was quite comfortable around men. Let me say that again. She was quite comfortable around men, and she had no fear of men. She really knew how to work them. Really, I could say that. And the other thing, as a child, she was the enforcer. She was the fighter. She was the one who did the fighting for her two brothers, one of which was in World War II and was a prisoner of war in Korea for 1,005 days. So we're not talking about men who are, you know, basically very passive, you know, let's put it like that. So she had that other aspect to her. And I remember, you know, when you're growing up, when you're in the midst of something, you're being targeted, you don't even know it. You know, one morning I was driving, because I had a practice of getting up early and driving my car. And so I was coming home. And so the LAPD was behind me. And every move I made, I turned, they turned. I stopped, they stopped. And so I pulled into the driveway and they pulled right into the driveway behind me. I got out of the car. They got out of their car. I went up onto our porch. They followed me up on the porch. And I opened the door, the screen door, and stepped in. And Caffie, it was almost like ballet. She came across me and she looked out, stepped out and said, "Do you have a warrant?" And they were like dumbfounded. No. She said, "Well, get the fuck off my porch." And, you know, and I was like, whoa. I kind of like, whoa. And the officer, the thug, the gun thug said, "Oh, you're real tough when you're around your mom, huh?" And so she said, "Well, what would you do if I wasn't here? What would you do? Lynch him?" And, you know, that's the kind of, she rolled like that too. That's one incident. Another incident is she pulled into a parking lot in Linwood of a supermarket. And so this young thug came up, put a gun in her face, you know, because he's going to carjack her. And without any word at all, you know, she popped him in the eye with a big keychain, and he left the gun and saved the eye. And I mean that's who she was. She didn't have any compunction about defending herself, defending her community and those she loved and the institutions she loved. So she would do, when you say any means necessary, that's, the way she rolled, period.
Right on. If I could just add one quick story about her forward thinking. I just want to say about the AIDS pandemic. So AIDS has killed the most people in US history, I believe, is nearing 1 million people over since 1980s. But Caffie in 1985 was way out in front. The Black community was very much, willing to let go of their gay community, let them die at the hands of this deadly virus. And Caffie was like, heck no. She was said, Black, doesn't matter who they're having sex with, they are Black people. Again, Black Lives Matter. When you talk about Black trans lives, Black queer lives mattering, Caffie was way ahead of the Christian church here, the Black church, because they were willing to let them go. But she helped get the first funding for Minority AIDS Project Los Angeles and Unity Fellowship Church, Reverend Bishop Bean. And so again, just going into the these communities where people just had written them off, and so Caffie Greene was not willing to write off any Black person for any reason, and so that's just another way of how forward she was, had light years beyond others in their thinking.
I have one last question and it could be to both of you actually, and it's about coalition building. I mean, people know Raymond and I working together in our jazz poetry ensemble and in our artist and activism, and we come from different backgrounds. And I'm just curious what you learned from Caffie and the cadre of other Black women there. Were they models for working in coalition with other ethnic groups and other activist groups? So if you have something about that.
Yes. Caffie was, interestingly, on her CV, you'll see that she was a member of a Native American group around their education project. And she was, and then very much in the Latino community in Linwood. She had a lot of allies and was always working in collaboration in that way. And one just fun story I have is of a Latino woman who she worked with on the Civil Brand Commission, who said Caffie taught her everything she knew about how to investigate those, inspect those prisons and hold people accountable and to speak up. So she was always willing to dialogue and work across all difference.
Interestingly, I think she was a master at coalition building and working across various ethnic lines and gender and sexual orientation lines. She was a master at doing that. And in fact, when she arrived in LA, aside from working for the relatives, she worked for a Jewish family called the Martins, named the Martins, and she told me about them, and she credited them for teaching her various things. She tells the story about them making her take a pair of shoes back to the store that she had purchased and wait, because the price would definitely go down. And it was true, it did. And they taught her about negotiating things and so forth. And so she talked about that. And the thing that was funny, because, as you allude to, Rue, she had all these friends and colleagues, and she would call brother so-and-so, brother Lowenberg, or brother Sanchez, and she really rolled like that. And it was fascinating because she would learn about their culture and at the same time, be very unapologetically Black and show them about, this is the way we do it. This is the way, and be open to this cross-fertilization, cross-pollination. And so I really admired that about her. And,
Well,
I took that lesson.
I definitely see it in both of you, actually. Charu and you both took that lesson to heart. So she demonstrated that in her life. And I think we're going to close out for tonight. We could talk forever about Mom Caffie, and
Yes,
I am
we
blessed
can.
that my mom is still with us and she's actually listening to all this. Mom Ellie in Florida, hello to you and all my love. And my sister is with her, and my mom's boyfriend Joseph, and my sister Batya. The next episode, episode 3, we have scheduled for Sunday, October 18th. And it's going to be songs from my father's.
Plural.
So it'll be about the dad influences. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Sarah. Give a round of applause for Sarah managing all the moving pieces.
Yeah. And we really do appreciate you taking your time to be with us today. That means so much to us. Thank you so very much.
I would like to just add, Charu, can you give us an update on the very latest of the book so people are interested in your manuscript?
Yes. So the latest on the book is it's currently under review by Routledge Press.
Routledge?
It's located in London. And it's on a special series organized by an African-American woman. The series is called Subversive Feminist Futures. So
whoa,
I think
I love it.
Caffie fits really perfectly on this series, and they're reviewing it. And I'm hoping we'll get a thumbs up and start editing and hearing about a publication date soon. That's all. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed and just very excited.
And from the chapters that I had read so far, that we were privy to, it's definitely a read that is available to the general public. It's not, it's academically researched, but I would say the way and the approach and the tone of it is available for the general read, which is so much like Caffie. She would have her binders and her papers and study for every meeting she went to. But when she approached people, you got her message no matter what education level you were at. She made it be known.
Right, absolutely.
All right, you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. So we love you guys.
Love you.
Aloha, mahalo.
So enjoy the music from UpSurge and some slides and watch the little bits.
Hear her regal roar, ranging, ruling the savannah. This night, lioness lurking, stalking the rippling zebra. This night, scattering the herd. They heard, I heard, lioness growling, hunting, gazelle sounds, pouncing, feeding young lions. Kuma, the word. They heard, I heard, lioness. They heard love notes, love notes. They heard, I heard music like love notes coming from nowhere. They heard, I heard. In this crazy world, it's not at peace with itself. You heard, they heard, I heard love notes coming from nowhere. Vamping on brilliance. And moving on.
Bye, Sheila. Bye, Russ. Bye, Keesley, Bill, Adam, Peter.